Hello and welcome to day one of Easter Unlocked, here with myself and Simon. Hi Simon.
Hello.
Are you excited?
Yeah, I am.
Brilliant. So over the next few days we're going to be unpacking the Easter story and discussing it together to pick out some of the key points of what is one of the most important stories in human history. This is a conversation though, so we want to encourage you over the next few days to really engage in the conversation, have a chat at home with the people you live with, and get involved with the discussion on social media as well. Comment on the YouTube video, and let's keep the discussion going. Should we get into it?
Yeah.
When the hour came, Jesus and his apostles reclined at the table, and he said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it again until it finds fulfillment in the kingdom of God. After taking the cup, he gave thanks and said, Take this and divide it among you. For I tell you, I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. And he took the bread, gave thanks and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. But in the hand of him who is going to betray me is with mine on the table. The Son of Man will go as it has been decreed, but woe to that man who betrays him. They began to question among themselves which of them it might be who would do this.
Great, so here we have this significant story, don't we? We have the Lord's Supper, something which would go on to shape churches and Christians for years and years to come. This most significant moment. Do you think the disciples were aware of what was happening here? Or do you think they maybe missed the importance of it?
Yeah, well, they didn't really have a great track record, did they, of
That's true.
The significance of events as they happened. You know, even in another event that happened on that night where Jesus washes their feet and he says to them, you know, you won't understand what I'm doing, but you will understand later. And I just wonder if that's the same with this meal that he's bringing to them and they're remembering. And actually, you know, this is the meal that people have celebrated down the centuries in remembrance of Jesus and all that he has done. And you know, we get to live in knowing and understanding all that it means now.
Definitely. And I wonder how often we, similar to the disciples, miss what God's doing in these bigger situations. We can, you know, look at something that's happening and then in years to come look back and be like, that was an amazing moment that God's working. And I think sometimes we just need to open our eyes a little bit, don't we, and just see what God might be doing.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing about this meal is hearing Jesus talk about one of his best friends, one of his disciples, about to betray him. I mean, imagine how that would have felt. What do you think Jesus was kind of going through as he was processing this, and what were the disciples thinking as he was sharing this?
Yeah, I know. Jesus experienced betrayal. Yeah. You know, Jesus felt the pain of that. We can think of Jesus sometimes as a robot, and you know, these these emotions just bounce off him. But that's not the case. You know, actually in Hebrews it says that that Jesus is able to sympathise with us, sympathise with our weaknesses. He's been through it, but actually he's been through it, but he's responded in the most perfect of ways. Sometimes the ways that, you know, we don't always respond when we face those types of situations. There's
real comfort found in this, isn't there? Because we are going to face deep emotional situations like Jesus does, and knowing that he's gone through that as well is such an encouragement for us, as you've said, which is great. And do you know, I'm just, as we're chatting, I'm thinking about the significance of this event. So we celebrate Lord's Supper regularly in church, and as Christians we're called to do that. But when you put it in the context of what's happening here, in terms of the emotion, in terms of what's about to happen afterwards, it just adds a real significance to it, doesn't it? It's just a helpful reminder for us.
Totally, and you know, it's a reminder that we're not alone as well. Remember that in the Lord's Supper, that, you know, we're not alone, that Jesus is present with us. And you know, we can remember that even as we go through moments of betrayal in life. Sometimes they can feel lonely times. But the reminder that Jesus went through that, and Jesus knows, and he's with us, knows that we're not alone in those times.
Brilliant. Let's see how the story moves on.
They went to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and Jesus said, Sit here while I go and pray. He took Peter, James, and John with him and became deeply troubled and distressed. He told them, "My soul's crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little further and fell to the ground. He prayed that if it were possible, the awful hour awaiting him might pass him by. "Abba, Father," he cried, "everything's possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done and not mine." Then he returned and found the disciples asleep. He said to Peter, "Simon, are you sleeping? Couldn't you watch with me even for 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit's willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them again and prayed the same prayer as before. And when he returned to them again, he found them sleeping. They couldn't keep their eyes open and they didn't know what to say. When he returned to them the third time, he said, "Go ahead and sleep. Have your rest." But no, the time's come. The Son of Man's betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here.
Great. So Simon, now we see one of the most raw and real passages in the whole Bible. You know, Jesus knowing what he's facing, he's going to go through immense suffering and pain. What can we learn from Jesus in this situation?
I know, yeah, we see Jesus going through this emotion, and it's not emotion in the way that we sometimes think about it, like, you know, unpredictably imbalanced or kind of driven by feelings in an unhealthy way. No, he's had a perfect inner life. Yet he senses this depth of feeling that we see here and that we read about here. And maybe as humans we kind of just think, oh, we have to switch off our emotions. But I think actually no, those are the times when we need to learn from the master. We need to learn from Jesus, the teacher, who helps us to be fully emotional, truly emotional in the right way.
I mean, this is the most human we probably see Jesus, isn't it, in the whole of the Gospels? And I'm just reflecting on this as a man, and I think so often in our culture, like, men have got to have this emotional wall, haven't they? And we can't show any emotion at all. But here we have the ultimate model of what it is to be a man, and he's there in front of his father, and he's kind of opening and pouring his heart out and sharing his emotion. I wonder where it all went wrong for us, eh? And then the second part of the story is the disciples. Okay, let's talk about them for a second, because they literally had one job. All right, stay awake and keep guard, and they couldn't do it. They messed up big style. What can we learn from them?
Yeah, totally. They couldn't stay awake, and clearly this is a story that's been remembered and it's been passed down through the Gospels for us. It's one of those stories that it's an embarrassing story, isn't it?
It is.
It just reminds us of the authenticity of the Gospel stories, because you know you wouldn't make up this story and add it in. It's embarrassing for you as disciples that you could not stay awake when Jesus most looked to you to stay awake. You just couldn't.
Definitely.
But I think it reminds us that in this mission, Jesus is going on it alone with his Father, of course, but he's this is not him and the disciples doing it teaming. They're not teaming salvation for the world. No, this is God making salvation for us.
Absolutely. And I think this little glimpse of the story is a reflection of the human condition, isn't it? The disciples on their own, in their own strength, couldn't do it. They couldn't do their one task. They couldn't follow Jesus' commandment. And that's like us. We can't on our own do anything to save ourselves. We can't, we mess up regularly. And I think it's comforting to see that the disciples, Jesus' closest mates, are in the same boat as us. We're going to mess up. But actually, that's how it had to be. Jesus was the one who had to take on the sins of the world, as you've already said. And he knew the disciples couldn't stay awake from him. It's just such an interesting story to have in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And immediately, even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men, armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the elders. The traitor, Judas, had given them a prearranged signal. "You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. Then you can take him away under guard." As soon as they arrived, Judas walked up to Jesus. "Rabbi," he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ear. Jesus asked them, "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there among you teaching every day. But these things are happening to fulfill what the scriptures say about me."
Okay, Simon, so now we have the big cinematic, climactic end to Thursday night's story. Jesus is about to be betrayed by Judas, and I can just picture it like some out of a movie. The crowd coming with their clubs and their sticks, coming to arrest Jesus. This is a real vivid cinematic image. What do you kind of reflect on it?
Yeah, well, I think cinematic is a really good word to use. You know, we can skim over this so easily, can't we, I think? And we need to see it for what it is. You know, those cinematic moments in films where there's moments of betrayal, and they stir a passion in us, don't they? Because we see the injustice of betrayal and all that means. And now here's God in the flesh, being betrayed by one of his friends.
Definitely.
But actually, in the midst of it, God is weaving his purposes. God is making his plans come to fruition. You know, I think of Joseph in the Old Testament, where you know, he goes through all he goes through, but he can say to his brothers at the end, you know, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And you kind of think, you know, Judas means this for evil, but God is working good.
Definitely, and we need to remember that, don't we, in our life? Sometimes we're going to face situations, and on the surface we're looking at it and we're thinking, God, what are you? You can't be in this situation. But actually, God does work things together for our good, and God works in ways that we don't expect sometimes. So, throughout this whole story, we're seeing so much that we can apply to our lives today, which is so interesting. Speaking of applying things to our lives, let's talk about Jesus' mate with the sword. I mean, how likely were you to act like him and start cutting ears off in a situation?
I know, you can't blame him, can you?
No,
I kind of think, you know, this is him kind of going, hey, you come and mess with us, this is what happens, this is what you're going to get. You know, and maybe some of his disciples were thinking, perhaps a violent revolution is still on. Perhaps we can still install Jesus as king this way. This is the moment. But actually, what do we see Jesus? We see Jesus having compassion on the guy and healing his ear. He shows compassion. He shows grace to his enemies. You know, and we think of those words of Jesus himself, where he says, actually, you know, love your enemies. Pray for your enemies. This is it in action, isn't it?
Definitely, it's amazing to see, because they often say, don't they, when you face your most difficult moments, when things get tough, what comes out of you is a real mark of your character. And it's amazing to see Jesus in his most difficult situation. His first reaction is love and compassion, and he heals this guy's ear. It's just so amazing to contrast the human attitude, which I'm sure we would all do, with swinging swords, and Jesus' attitude of loving his enemies. What an encouraging way to end Thursday night's story. Guys, thank you so much for watching today. We'll be back again tomorrow for day 2 of Easter Unlocked. But as we said at the beginning, please do keep the conversation going on social media and at your dinner table. We'd love to hear different people's thoughts on the Easter story. Simon, thanks so much.
Thanks, mate.